Alright, welcome back to Savage Fabrication and Spool Performance. We're going to be adjusting the timing on this 12 valve. I did a video a while ago, thought I might do another one. Maybe we can get a little bit better stuff inside this one. So I've already rotated the motor over, so we're about to unplug the TDC. You're going to, now this, pull this guy out from underneath the pump. You can usually reach behind the charge pipe or in front of it. Easier if you go behind. There's nothing in your way. There's normally a little lock that holds this in. Use a small 90-degree pick to pull it out. You don't need to put the lock back in. This O-ring holds it in there just fine. If you do have a ton of crankcase pressure, because for whatever reason you have a bunch of crankcase pressure, you might have to put the lock back in. To put the lock back in, the easiest way to do it is just to use a deep socket that fits inside, around this, but inside of the bore that this goes into. You kind of get started and then just shove it with a socket versus beating the crap out of your fingers trying to put it in. So we're going to rotate the motor a little more and get it to line up. I personally use a billet version, a machined aluminum one, as a tool, because I don't have to worry about breaking the customer's one, and it locks in real nice and firm. It's easier to pull out without having to worry about breaking it. So I'm going to get this guy to go. Alright. I use alternator. It's going to be a 21 or 22 millimeter. In this case, it's a 22. Maybe it just depends on who's remanning it. TDC for injector number 1. Not injector, I shouldn't say injector number 1, that's TDC piston 1. As long as that was set up right, which I'm trusting that it was. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to put this one back in because we're going to run it. Few marks. I got some timing tape. Make our marks on the dampener. Get out a degree wheel. Mark out the range that we're going to be using, and then we're going to go ahead and start up and timing light this thing and see where it's at. So I have an actual timing wheel for if a motor's on a stand that I made out of a normal Summit Racing degree wheel. Drilled it out so it'll fit the dampener on these things, so you can do it on a stand, but you can't exactly put that inside the engine bays. So this magnetic one from PDD is honestly fantastic. I love this thing. And this is what I call timing tape. Now, it's a highly reflective, it's a reflective optical tape is what it actually is. And if you buy it from the manufacturer of, say, a RPM Tech pickup company, it's very expensive. But if you go buy it for optical range measurement devices, you can get a lot of it for very cheap, and it's the exact same thing. So marketing. If you look at where they actually got the parts from, you'll find that they're not as expensive as they actually are. So it's just a highly reflective tape. When the timing light flashes off, it's very easy to distinguish what I'm looking at. So this is going to go on the dampener. I'm going to mark out on the top of the dampener the degrees on this tape, and then once that's done, we can run it, get the timing light out, and get a see the injector pulse and see when it's firing off the injector. Alright, so way down here we got our little pointer, and we have all of our degrees marked out. So -10 all the way up to +40. So it's supposed to be at 28. We're going to find out. I mean, maybe it is at 28. It's pinned 28, but a lot of the times they're low. It starts fairly easy and is not really too loud of an engine sound for only being, well, for being, supposedly 28. It sounds more like it's in the 22, 24 range, maybe 24. 26 and up starts to get pretty loud. It does have big injectors in it, which is going to quiet that down, but we're going to find out. So we're going to get all stuff out and check what it is, so then we can go make an adjustment. So it's about right here. So we're looking at about 18 degrees is when the injector is actually opening. I do not disbelieve that it is pinned from 28 degrees in advance. So remember, we have two check valve systems in place, and these don't open as soon as the spill port is closed. When the spill port closes, pressure starts to raise until the pressure is enough to lift this off the seat, the DV, and then lift the needle off the seat, the injector. No spray is actually done, so we see a pressure rise. That's what that tool measures. It measures line swell. Lines do swell. It's sensitive enough to pick that up. And that line swell and then release is what the snap-on tool is watching for, and then it sends a signal to the timing light so we can get an idea of when it's going off. So if the injector pop pressure has been raised, it's going to cause timing to happen later. If the whatever delivery valves and how they're shimmed has been messed with, that's going to change that adjustment. So a lot of times on a good performance injector, the pop pressure is going to be increased. This helps get the spray to spray out farther when the cylinder is hotter, because we want that mixing. We don't want the burn to be happening too close to the injector. You don't want it too close to the wall. You don't want it too close to the injector. Over and over, time says that as it gets hotter, we're going to need more pressure to get that plume to reach out farther and get the good higher quantity of O2 that's available farther out in the bore. So as everything gets warmer, the plume tends to shrink up. So pop pressure gets raised, so it launches out farther, higher rate of speed, better mixing. But when that happens, the actual timing gets retarded when you increase the pop pressure of the injectors. Most all of your top competitors in sled pulling and drag racing on mechanical stuff all have non-factory pop pressure settings on their injectors. They're usually all raised up. And then you just account for that in your timing. You have to add more timing in. It's not actually adding more timing in. You're trying to get back to where you were when you were on the previous set of injectors. So we're going to get this as a billet front cover on it, all these bolts, and get this all off and get this gear popped. Alright, so we're going to go over next step. I've rotated the motor 360 to put it on. It's actually the lobe's actually on, so we're actually working on the side of the pump that the lobe would be working. This tool works as long as the pump is not benched and flowed, as long as the DVs are factory, and as long as the injectors are at factory pop pressure. We're dealing with a truck that does not have factory DVs. It does not have injectors that are at the factory pop pressure. That's why our actual timing is not where it's pinned. So you can rotate the motor over backwards if you have a good belt, a good tensioner. On the alternator, it's a 21 or 22, depends on who makes it. And now we're on the pump with my favorite pump gear puller, with a breaker, because this one's extra tight. Normally I could just use a regular half, but this one seems to be a little stubborn. Why I use this now, it's all set up in there. We're on the lifting part of the lobe, so we're not going to go to zero or anything. If the pump spins underneath, I can put it right back where it was. So once I break the motor loose, I know where the pump needs to be, and then I'm going to retard the engine the amount of degrees I want to advance, which is going to be 10 degrees in this case. So I'm going to go to doing this part. You want to be very careful. You use the big guy to keep the motor from turning clockwise while we turn the puller clockwise to pull the gear off. It sounded a little bit weird for a second. I had to make sure I was doing this right. When you take the nut loose, it's over there now, tell. Hold your finger against the pump snout and then slide do not remove your finger until you have the nut and the washer on your finger, and then remove it, wrap it up, and put it in a safe spot. So I'm going to continue and get this pulled off. wear gloves for this part because if it slips, the shroud is pretty sharp. You'll cut yourself. Been there, done that. What time is that? Oh, Jesus. And the pump did move, but we only moved a little bit. We went from 0.244 to 0.2. And we're on the 3. Didn't move a whole lot, so we're gonna get a tool out, rotate the pump back where it needs to go. Was stubborn. There's a tool I bought. I've had it for quite some time. Threads onto the pump snout and tighten this down, and then you can rotate the pump forwards and backwards. That's super handy for this because now, before, if it would have done this, I would have had to go and reattach the gear to the pump lightly, put the pump back where it was, then pop it off, then put the motor back where it was. In this case, I only got to move the pump, and I don't got to put the gear back. So as you saw in the time lapse, we used the tool to rotate the pump back to where it was. We fell down to a 38, or a 35, 38. And now it's back up to where it was. It's 345 or 344 is where it was. Plus or minus a notch isn't a huge deal. If you're having issues with the pump spinning underneath the nut while you're trying to torque it, you can go down below, two notches. I know they're not called notches, but that's what we're calling them for right now. It makes it easy. So we've now rotated the engine backwards. So we're at where we want to be. So we're a hair shy, just in case it does rotate. We'll end up just where we want to be. Now to clean everything, the lower nut bolt goes in here, so you can hold this guy up while you brake clean it. You have to brake clean these things. There's no other real way to get in there and clean as much of the oil off as you can. So we're going to go get out the big torque wrench and torque this thing to 165 foot-pounds. You're going to do a set torque at 15, and then, sorry for moving so much, 15, 30, 15, 35, and then go up to 165. Yeah, that'll work. Sorry for jumping around. The main set is just to get the gear seated. From there, we're good to go tight. So we brake clean the gear and the shaft to get as much oil out of there as possible, so it should be nice and cleaned up. We got out our torque wrench. It's 15 when I checked my notes, and they were at the very bottom of my pile. It's been quite some time since I've had to do a timing gear. I have adjustable gears on most of the stuff around here that we compete with, so don't have to do this too often, but the right tools for the job. So I'm going to let the brake clean evap off a little bit more, and we'll be right back, and we'll get the nut on, go to 15 foot-pounds, and then 165 foot-pounds. So we did our initial torque with this normal half-inch torque wrench. The next part is really easy, although this goes to 165. It's much easier if you have a 1-inch drive. Or 3/4 drive. So we always want to make sure that we come back. It's going to move a little bit while you're doing this, but you want to make sure it returns back. Well, that's how I do this by myself. Total pain in the butt. you do have the opportunity to have somebody help you. The help seat, but you can do it by yourself. So just push on. So pull. Just torque. And to hold it there, but you can see holding it where we're. You're timed where we want to be. So the Sharpie marks go to the right of the wire. So you're trying to right underneath the wire, straight to the side of it, so I know where it's going. That's the big reason why I use the indicator still, because I can see where the pump's at before I take the gear loose. Make sure that if it does move, I can put it back to where it was with the tool, and then while torquing the gear, I can make sure that the shaft isn't moving underneath before I get so far as to have everything all buttoned up and be in the wrong spot. Very often, if you just move the engine some degrees and you tighten the thing all back up, if you don't have a way to watch what the plunger is doing, there is a good chance that the shaft is turning under the nut. If that happens, you're going to advance the timing a lot more than you originally thought. Over advancing the timing is extremely hard on engine parts, and it will not make more power. If you hit an over advanced engine with nitrous, it's a pretty good chance you will knock the head gasket out of it, in the worst case hurt pistons. So it's important to have the right tools for the job. I originally got this to time using the lift method. After learning more about injection pump building and injectors and the injection process, that's when it turned into using a timing light. I was referenced to a timing light by somebody who's been doing this a lot longer than I have, that builds injectors, and it competes at a professional level in diesel competitive motorsports. So that's the big reason for this guy, is to watch the plunger, make sure the plunger is not moving around. If the plunger is moving around, we know that the shaft's moving underneath. It will move around while you're torquing. The big thing is while you release everything, it comes back to where it was. If you can't hold the belt, or it's starting to move everything all at one time and you're near the end, hit that torque spec and then move it back, the motor back to where it was, and then go ahead and check your number. Your number should be at the same spot that it was before with the engine in the same location. Normally, I use the tack pickup instead of a wire. In this case, it has a large fluid dampener on it. I think it's a full race kit or whatever they call it. So the tack pickup's way over here. Not very helpful to try and look at timing marks from the side like that, or while laying underneath trying to convey what's going on. So that's where you make a little wire tool, write your timing tape, make all your marks, and then you can look directly down at it and make sure that's exactly what you need to do. Now, on here it looks like it's not 28, but I said all my marks are to the right of the wire, instead of trying to write underneath a wire. When I get this thing all put back together, we'll get it fired up. It's hard to see, but the spill port is uncovered right there on the top edge. So we're going to cover it and we'll see what our new pin timing is. So now you won't be able to see it, but the spill port is just covered, and the new pin is about 34 degrees. So about 33 to 34. So looking at this graph here, we can see the curve with the mile an hour, and it's easy with gear ratio and all that stuff to go find engine RPM and torque output. So looking at this graph on the loaded dyno, it's pretty easy to see. The 625, we can go ahead and add 15% to it if you want. You don't have to. It's just what the dyno operator said after running his truck on it. So when we go back and over and look at our graph, our curves are actually very similar for being loaded to unloaded, which is extremely surprising to me. I was not expecting to see that. I was more predicting to be around 80 to 120 down, not 21 or 23 down. So that was really surprising and pretty awesome. So kind of gives us a good idea for stuff that's, you know, sub 1,000, sub 1,300 or whatnot. It's fairly apples to apples. If you want to go ahead and throw 23 horsepower on top of your number on my dyno, or any Inertia dyno for that matter, go for it. It's just a number. Your track times or performance at the sled track is what it ultimately comes down to, and it's a tuning device. The other thing that we can see is that on our first time that we added 10 degrees of timing in, we picked up the same horsepower that he was making before with nitrous. So now he can make that horsepower without the bottle using his track times versus the dyno output. So 10 degrees added about 80 to 85 or 75 to 85 wheel horsepower, which is what he was spraying with the bottle previously. But then when we threw another 4 degrees in it, we only picked up a horsepower. So that tells us we're right at the line that adding more timing is going to start putting cylinder pressure in the wrong spot of crank angle, which is really important when it comes to not blowing head gaskets and not hurting rods, bearings, pistons, and all that stuff. It would probably be a good thing to go back 4 degrees or 2 degrees and then add nitrous in to get that cylinder pressure spike where it needs to be. But the head seems to be staying on. We're going to leave it where it's at. He's going to enjoy the truck. It can run time faster than what it started to go. So realistically, until he kind of gets that all handled, probably just going to leave it how it is until he changes some stuff. But he was really happy seeing that 800 number. I was really happy seeing my Inertia dyno be as close as it is to top of the line Superflow load cell dyno. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll get working on the next video after this. Thank you. Bye. One time, I don't care.